All right, so we should be live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the National Novel Writing Month Fictionary ProWritingAid First Editing Kobo Writing Life webinar. So I'm super excited to have this great panel of experts to talk about going from your first draft all the way to having your novel published. So I see some people are already putting their comments in the chat of where they're from, and that's really nice. It's really great to see everybody here from around the world. So for those of you who are up late or up super early, that's really wonderful. Thank you for making the effort to be with us. We're basically going to go through our agenda, and you can put questions in the comments, and we'll either answer them as we go or at the end, depending on how the flow is going. We've got a fairly large panel here today. But basically, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, right from writing your first draft in National Novel Writing Month, and Grant's going to talk about that, all the way through doing a story edit to a copy edit to using a professional editor to actually publishing your novel. So we brought together key experts in each of these areas, and everybody's going to talk about the top 2 things you need to know to be successful in each of our areas. And we chose this group, one, because I love collaborating, and so does this team of people. But we're also believers in combining technology with people to get the best stories out there possible in the world. And all of us have organizations that use both people and technology to accomplish this. So obviously we'll start with Grant today because he's representing National Novel Writing Month. And he's going to give you advice on getting that first draft written. But I wanted to say a little bit about my personal experience with Nano first. I've written 5 novels, and 2 of them I've written in National Novel Writing Month. And I just wanted to show the difference. So a novel that I wrote, I actually took a little sabbatical and decided I'm going to write a novel. And it took me a full 5 months to write this novel. And then I discovered National Novel Writing Month, and I did my next novel there. And it took me 1 month while I was working. And I got my word count done. I got my first draft done. So, having that deadline and watching the word count in particular just completely motivated me. And so, obviously I'm a huge Nano fan because it worked for me, and I have comparison novels to show that. And then after Grant, we're going to talk to Lisa from ProWritingAid, and I'm sure everybody here knows Lisa, ProWritingAid, copy editing. I'm a big fan. I use ProWritingAid every day, not just for my fiction, but for my nonfiction. And ProWritingAid, of course, works within Fictionary, so we're particularly happy about that. Then we're going to move on to JoEllen from First Editing. And JoEllen and I have a very special relationship in that I've had my work edited there, but I've also trained all of her editors, and her company is the first Fictionary certified story coach company in the world. And so if you're looking for a professional story edit, they specialize in story editing. Then we're going to go on to Tara. And so Tara is with Kobo Writing Life. So obviously I've gathered my group of team that I love. So on Kobo, one of my books hit #1 there. So I've used their services. I know what Kobo is all about. And so that's why this panel is together to give you advice from writing that draft all the way to publication. So having said all that long intro, it's now over to Grant from National Novel Writing Month.
Thanks so much, Kristina. I loved hearing your story about how NaNoWriMo worked for you and how you took a 5-month writing experience down to 1 month. And when you said that we're all writers and writing organizations who also have a huge technology component, sometimes I think writers actually want technology to take care of that whole rough draft, to get them all the way through it, because it can be tough. But that the tough part of writing a rough draft, that is also the joy, and so you don't want to skip it. And I think right now we're in what we call Nanoprep season, and the beauty of that is it's all about like conjuring your novel, thinking about what you're going to write, why you're going to write it. And then for people who are planners, we've got all these great resources on the website and activities planned. We have a whole curriculum around Nanoprep that will help you if you're a planner, a plancer, and maybe even a pantser. So check it out. But that said, like coming in today, you asked me to think of 2 issues that NaNoWriMo writers face, or 2 things that I would recommend thinking about in order to be successful. And I think sometimes at this point, we are really thinking about our novel idea and how to plan it and outline it and prepare. But I think there's actually a type of preparation that's more important, at least if you're going to really reach the finish line, whether that's in November or later, because all those stages beyond November can be tough and grueling and challenging, and also joyful and wonderful. So let's not forget those components. Keep playfulness, keeping playful the whole way, generally. So anyway, I was thinking the 2 things I'd like to focus on are that NaNoWriMo writers need to succeed are developing a strategy for writing and also developing a mindset for writing. And on the strategy level, I think of time management. I think a lot of people sign up for NaNoWriMo. They're super excited about their novel. They're super excited to write, but they haven't really thought about how they're going to make time to write for a month, especially if you're a new writer. It's a big thing to write 50,000 words in a month. It's a big thing for me, and I've been doing it for years. And so every year, I do this too. I have to think, like, it takes me about 2 hours to write 1,677 words a day. And so I have to think, how am I going to open my life up to 2 hours of writing? Because right now I don't write 2 hours every day. And so I have to, we recommend people go on a time hunt and actually keep track of their activities for a week to see how they use time. It's really enlightening, actually. You might spend a lot more time on social media than you think you do, or a lot more time watching Netflix shows. And so that's the purpose of it, actually, is to think about where are some pockets of time I can open up, And so for me, it might be waking up earlier in the morning, It might be writing for 10 minutes on my lunch break, or I'm not an evening writer, but it might be that I squeeze in a half hour in the evenings. All these things add up. So I think the main thing is to think about how are you going to do it, and then making a plan, making a concrete plan to open up that time to write so that you can hit 50,000 words, because otherwise time doesn't happen to you. You got to make time happen. You've got to have your priorities inform your use of time. So that's one recommendation. And also just to remember, actually, that you build big things in increments. This is like a lesson of NaNoWriMo. 50,000 words is a huge task, and it can be really intimidating and daunting. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be, because if you break it down into 1,700 words a day, it's much more manageable. So just focus on that daily progress. And also, if you've fallen behind, keep going. We've heard so many stories of people who, they might get sick the first week, they might have something happen in their life and miss a week, but sometimes they can readjust, recalibrate their time, power write on the weekends. We've heard people catch up in amazing ways. They've been dispirited, and then suddenly that last couple of weeks, they'll get re-inspired by their novel, and they'll kind of get this gust of wind that will take them to the finish line.
Grant, one of the tips that somebody gave me that I thought was really useful is do that time planning thing with the people in your life who are going to have to take up the slack a bit. Especially for me, I've got a family and a partner, and there's a lot of things that need to be done. And the fact that it's a 1 month and you're going to you have to pull out a bit, and they're going to have to cover a bit for you during that month. But then there's an endpoint, and I feel like it's a lot easier for people to get on board.
It's a marvelous way to teach your kids to wash the dishes after dinner, and to take out the trash, and your spouses too, need some lessons in that regard to help you out with your creative pursuits. You're right, it's a team effort. The other thing I was going to say about mindset, I saw this movie last night, and I highly recommend it. It's Shang-Chi, and Awkwafina's in it, and I love Awkwafina, and she's just pure 110% Awkwafina. And her character, though, she has a hard time committing to things that require commitment, I guess. And so she says this line to this wise woman in the film. She says, I like to do things, and then when I get just good enough, then I quit and go on to something else. And the woman says to her, if you don't aim at a target, and she's actually doing bow and arrow lessons at the time, she goes, if you don't aim at a target, you'll never hit it. And I think that's what I'm talking about is a commitment to finish during NaNoWriMo, is that you've got to aim for that target, which is 50,000 words, and then like think about how you're going to hit it. Because what we find actually is, if you look at our data, a lot of people quit writing in that first week of NaNoWriMo. And what happens is they're super excited about their novel idea. And the thing about novel ideas is that they're at their best before you start writing them. They're so glowing and magical. And that's not to say that you shouldn't pursue them. It's just to say that when you start writing them, it requires commitment to reach that level of magic that you started with. And that's the joy of it, really, is to find that magic and to find that, you know, glow while you're writing it. So commit to the whole 50,000 words, because you're going to go through a lot of ups and downs. So don't quit on the down moments. They might just last a day or two. They might last a week or two, but just keep moving forward. Yeah. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, I just want to comment on that. Two things. The book, Big Magic by Elizabeth, who wrote
Gilbert.
Eat, Pray, Love. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's an awesome book about sticking to your creativity. It's really a pep talk on how to bring creativity into your life. So it's a really fun read. And the other thing I wanted to say about process when you're going through National Novel Writing Month is, okay, sometimes you get stuck. Well, you don't have to write your book in order. So if you know what your climax scene is, or you know what your midpoint is, or some scene along the way, or scenes that you want, write them. Just write them. And then afterwards, when you're revising, you can get them all in order and in the right place in your novel. But sometimes just going, well, I know what my ending is. I'm going to write it. Put that down. And then you can figure out the different things in between. And it takes the pressure off of having to go from word 0 to word 50,000 in the same order. That, you know, you can just do it in any order and then pull it together.
I call it skip noveling. And I think I think there's that's part of the magic, right? Is writing what you're excited about and replenishing your creative fuel. And that's one way to do it. So that's a fantastic tip, Kristina. Yeah. We're all too linear and chronological, I think. There's no reason we have to follow things in
I also
order.
like dropping little like cheats, that like just a little note for myself that says she escapes miraculously here. And then I move on to the next bit after she's escaped, because I haven't quite figured out how she's going to escape. So I just drop that, and then when I've got more time and creativity, I can go back and fill that bit in. But it's a little cheat.
Well, what's great about it is that somewhere in your magical mind, you're probably thinking about that plot conundrum while you're writing other stuff. And then sometime while your husband and children are doing chores, that a light will go off, and you'll say, "This is the thing," and you can write it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully we've got lots of people on here today who are going to do National Novel Writing Month this November.
Sign up at NaNoWriMo.org.
Yes, I did put that across the banner on the bottom, and it is free, and it's very encouraging with the whole community that's around it. And you know, there's lots of people involved in your own areas too. Maybe even your own city. There's groups of people who are writing the Nano together and stuff. And so there's just so much to it. I just want to answer two questions. One is, yes, because you've signed up, you automatically get a replay. So that's easy. And the other is, it was Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert was the book that I mentioned.
And since you mentioned that, I want to just give one plug here. We have this book, No Plot, No Problem, which is written by Chris Beatty. He's the founder of NaNoWriMo. And so it's basically everything you need to know about NaNoWriMo success.
I love this. Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say that, I really love the fact that just having that goal in mind, even if you fail, you've still come so much further than you ever would have by not planning and not trying. I tell my kids this every day, just show up. Best things in life happen when you show up. And if you give yourself that time and that the permission, then you will get somewhere. Maybe, and you won't, we don't learn to walk in a day. We don't learn to write a book in a week. So it takes time, but this is how we do it. It's the same, with the editing process. You just take it in small bits until you get it. And it's that structural point that you can put it together for the big picture of the puzzle. So keep trying.
Thank you for mentioning that, JoEllen, because I've had so many people walk up to me out of the blue, strangers at parties, and they've apologized for only writing 10,000 words during NaNoWriMo. And I always say that is a huge achievement, like 10,000 words in a month. If you keep that up for a year, that's 120,000 words in a year. which it could be 2 novels essentially in there. So
I think I'm
Yeah.
one of those apologists, Grant. I'm always saying to you that
Tara.
I haven't yet finished Nano. I've only gotten to the 25,000. Like,
Oh,
but
that's huge.
that is
Yeah,
good.
so-
Maybe this year's my year, you know.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
will be.
do it. Do it.
You know what, Tara? Why don't you just make a promise right now that you're going to do it, and then we have it recorded, so you have to.
I should have thought of that before I opened my mouth. Sure, yeah, no, I'm happy. I'm down for the challenge. We'll have a little a group. We have a Kobo Writing group within NaNoWriMo. So if anyone wants to hold me accountable, they can do that there.
Well, that's great. I was going to say that the time management and the commitment parts, they're enhanced by the community of
Yep.
NaNoWriMo. And we're a community before we're at an event. So that community is there year round. But it's there, for one, to encourage you through those tough times. And it takes a lot of different forms, which you can find out on our website or in like writing groups like the one that you formed, Tara. But it's also accountability. Like they say that the best way to quit smoking is to tell people you're going to quit smoking, because then you don't want to fail. There's this kind of peer pressure that you project into the world. And I think it applies to novel writing too. So post on Facebook, tell your friends you're writing a novel, because the last thing you want to do is to see them in the grocery store and have them ask about your novel and say that you quit. So yeah.
Pressure.
Yeah. Friendly pressure.
Friendly pressure. Yeah. Alrighty. So we're going to move on to story editing, because that's the next phase. So if you're anything like me, when you finish National Novel Writing Month and December 1st hits, you're going to be exhausted. And you may even be mad at your book and not like it or whatever. You're just going to be tired. And that's okay. And that's great. But you should reward yourself. It's an amazing accomplishment to do this. No matter how many words you write, you have more at the end of the month than you had at the beginning. And that's fabulous. And you should be pleased with that. But after you've had a break and you feel all better about it, and you've had time away from your book to think about it, that's when it's time to do a story edit. And that's where I come in. That's where I love to focus is after draft, before copy editing. And story editing, what you're doing at that point is you're looking at the overall structure of your story. You're looking at character, plot, and setting, and you're trying to figure out, is it formed in the best way possible to make it engaging to the reader. So you're not worried at this point at word level, sentence level, grammar, punctuation. You can, obviously, lots of people like to do it at the same time. That's great. For me, I find that really hard, that if I focus on that, I'm not focusing on the story. And sometimes, just to be productive, I do some copy editing because I can't focus on the story. So there's many, many ways to do this. But really, once you have a draft, and all the draft means is that you've got, it sounds silly, but a beginning, a middle, and an end. So there's an actual story, and that you've got your key points in there. So you go from your opening image, inciting incident, all the way to your climax and resolution and the scenes in between. And that's your draft. And some of the scenes could be one word at this point, or a sentence of this scene will have an event, whatever that event is. But at that point, you can start organizing the form of your story. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a story editing perspective. So when you write in a month and you've done your whole book, it's a pretty crazy experience, and you're cranking that book out. And so at the time, lots of the scenes will think, this is awesome. I've done this scene or that scene, and you put it all in there. But when you reread it, you have some questions about that maybe you just got a tad excited about one storyline or another. And this is the point at the beginning of your story edit to decide, what's your story actually about, and write a blurb. And I don't mean a formal, it's got to be word perfect blurb, but think of what you would put on the back cover. What's your promise to the reader for this story? And as you're performing your story edit, reference it on every scene. And that way, you're true to that goal. And in your blurb, it should say who's the protagonist of your story and what is their goal. And then now you know what's your promise to the reader. You know who your protagonist is and what they're trying to achieve. And you may find that changes as you revise. You might find that you started NaNoWriMo and then by the end of it, it's different. But if you at least start your story edit with a blurb, you'll stay true to it and you won't get carried away. And so that's where scene by scene editing comes in. And at that point, so now you have your blurb, you know what you're promising. And once you have that, you're going to edit scene by scene. And it may be throughout the month, you didn't really break into scenes, or you randomly broke into scenes, or you just kind of wrote down what you needed to write down. So to do your story edit, you need to look through your story and look at, okay, do my groupings of scenes make sense? Do they start and end in the right place? Do I have the right point of view character for the scene? And really, if you're not sure where to start a new scene, look for places where the point of view character changed, the location changed, or the time changed in a big way. Jump forward, jump backward, whatever. These are triggers to go, oh, I could start a new scene here. And by doing that, you'll have your knowledge or your novel broken out into scenes. And then the next big task is, once you do that, you go back to your blurb and then you go, okay, I know what my story is about. I need to name my scene, and I need to know why it's in the book. And the reason I say name your scene is that if you can't name your scene in a few words, it's not focused enough. You should be able to, in a few words, excluding glue words, as Lisa likes to say, get rid of those glue words, just name your scene, Kristina car crash. And then, okay, that scene is I had a car crash. That's it. That's all you need to say. But there, okay, this scene has focus because I could do that. And if you can't name your scene, it's hard to tell what's it about. Once you name it, then ask yourself, why is it in the book? And when you're answering that, you look at your blurb and you go, okay, what is the purpose of this scene? Well, it's because Kristina actually hit somebody when she did that, and that's the story of the book. So of course it's related to the story. But what if, the book I'm writing is a love story, and in it I have a scene where there's a car accident, but it has nothing to do with the story. It's just an exciting scene, but it's nothing to do with the story. That scene can be cut. You don't need it, but maybe it was just fun for whatever reason to write it. And so those are the kind of the big things that I find when someone's done a draft quickly, is that they get away from the purpose of their story and the purpose of the scenes, and then the story is going all over the place. So that's my very quick, write a blurb, know what the purpose of every scene is. So those are my two things for story editing. Okay.
The thing that I love about story editing is the overview, because it's interesting hearing that everybody has their own place where they fall down, because I did get through my 50,000 words once, and then I was like, I don't know what to do now. And trying to figure out how to edit it just felt massive. It was just like 50,000 words in 10 chapters, and I didn't know how to look at it. I couldn't remember what happened. It just never occurred to me to break it into scenes and write it down as an outline. And because I was a pantser back in those days. And so doing it scene by scene just gives you this like high level view of everything that you've written that I just think is so essential if you want to be able to figure out if it works.
And the great thing is now there's so many more tools being developed every day that kind of help you do that. So if you are just, if you've got the big goal of publishing, and then you're going to have to format your book anyhow. And when you put it into these professional editing tools, it automatically does a story arc. And then you can compare it. Okay, I've got the names of my scenes. Are they really working? And that it's like a light bulb goes off. You finally got a map. And then you use that as your compass to get, to your journey. And I mean, your ultimate destination, most people is publishing or sharing your story, whatever it may be. But that allows you to see, okay, am I engaging with my readers? Am I following the genre in which I'm writing? And how does it match up? And that's one of the great things, like with ProWriting, they compare it with all the different types of writers out there, and that's really, really cool to do that comparison. But if I just throw it into Fictionary, boom, I've got the story arc, and now everyone can go forward. And we use that as editors because it's essential in today's world to keep up. And why not use the tools that are available? I mean, AI is blowing our minds.
And I love that statement. Grant, were you going to say something there?
Sorry. Oh, I was just going to riff on what Lisa said, because I thought it was so interesting that she was a pantser. I think pantsing,
a reformed pantser.
Or form pantser. Pantsers are always so insecure about pantsing. I say that as a pantser. They think the planners have it all figured out. But here's another angle on that, is that pantsing is a way of planning your novel, because you are exploring your novel and planning it on the page in the moment. It's just a different technique. And then you take that rough draft, it's going to be rough, but you apply everything you just said, Kristina. Like I always say, that writing the outline doesn't have to happen before writing the novel. It can happen like after the first draft or after the second draft. So those naming a scene, that's a great way to approach that rough draft that you've just pantsed. So
Yes.
I just want to stick up for pantsers, reformed or unreformed. It's a great way to be creatively.
Yeah, well, and the scenes in Fictionary that some of the things that I think is great is you can tag the different scenes in Fictionary, and so you can see which characters are in each of your different scenes. And so if in your head you've got a subplot that's like going along, but then when you look, you like zoom out and you think, oh, there's 7 chapters in the middle where this character never showed up, and then all of a sudden they show up again for 3 in a row. I mean, that's weird. And so then you can fix that, and it just gives you a view that you wouldn't know otherwise. So I think it's really useful.
So I love the comment about pansters, because I actually am a pantster. And people always think I'm not because I have Fictionary. But I love to just explore and write a book. That's my joyful place. But the naming the scenes is how I do my outline. So I always have an outline. And I'm glad you pointed that out. That's a really cool thing to say, because that's how I do it. So I think it's
But Kristina, then you're separated. I mean, that's the brilliance, is the creativity part is the writing and the logical part is the editing. So you're doing both, but you're enjoying where you are and you're in the now, and that mindful just creating. But you also know that when it's over, in order for it to follow that traditional story form and that arc, then that's where the logic comes in. So they're really, I think that no judgment. Do what feels good, and do what works for you, and then use use the techniques when it's time, but not before then.
Terrific. So we have one question here: is character development valid reason for a scene? And that's from Steve. And that's a great question. And yes, it is. What you want to be careful with, if that's your reason for the scene, typically you're going to have character development scenes early in the book. So your reader knows who your character is as they go through, and you can experience the character arc with them. If you're doing character development after the midpoint, think very carefully about it as to why is the character development there. It may be that you needed a character at that point as a new character. Okay, you still then want to minimize it and not have the full character development you would have for your main characters, because if they're coming in that late, they're not your main character, right? So you can have lots of things. Revelation could be a reason. You need more tension and conflict, but that has to be related to the plot line, but you want to pick up the pace. And so you're putting a scene in that picks up the pace related to the plot. So there's lots of reasons, and the list is endless of why a scene could be in the novel. If you can relate it back to the blurb, and that's why I like the blurb to be in there, because it gives you a way to test it if it makes sense. So hopefully that answered that. All righty, so let's move on to copy editing and see what Lisa has to say.
Okay, so the reason that I think NaNoWriMo is so great is because it does force you just to get everything down on paper. But the way editing and writing works is it's a cycle, and everybody has a different length for their cycle. We did a webinar with Ian Rankin recently, and he has a daily cycle where he writes and then he goes to sleep, and then in the morning he edits that bit and then he goes on to the next bit. So he has a really short 1-day cycle. With NaNoWriMo, you've got a month cycle. So you're just getting it all out, which is amazing and magic. And you can just put all kinds of junk in there, throw the cliches in if that's what's going to hold your spot. Your sentences are going to be long and meandering. You're going to repeat yourself 22 times in the same paragraph. That's fine. Just don't worry about it. Just get it down and get it out. But the big issue is, and I speak from experience because I think it was about 18 years ago, before I had worked as an editor and as a writer and for ProWritingAid, I got all the way through and then I didn't do the work. So if you're going to do NaNoWriMo and you want your book to go somewhere, do the work and prepare for it. And just think as you're writing that this is the first part of your cycle, and then in the months following, and maybe it's months, maybe you try and do it like on a shorter, more intense way as well, but you have to do the work, and you have to go back and find all those things that you just chucked in there while you were getting to your word count. And for me, it just felt overwhelming. I just didn't know where to begin. It just felt like all these words, and I didn't really know what was good and what was bad, and I didn't know how to focus on. And I ran into what I think is a problem that's really common. I did a lot of editing on my first chapter. My first chapter was tight. And then I just kind of like meandered away, and it got boring, and I just didn't have a system and a plan. And I think this is something that works really well for Fictionary as well, is try and break it down into bite-sized pieces. You know, just have a whole day where, you know, you can use ProWritingAid for this, or you can do it yourself, but a whole day where you just like hit your whole manuscript looking for passive voice. Hit your whole manuscript just looking for repetition. And every sentence needs to have a look, every single one, because every sentence is a little story in itself where somebody does something. There's a subject and a verb, and something happens, and that's your tiny little story. And so many of those tiny little stories will be better if you rewrite them. So take the time to rewrite your sentences, particularly if ProWritingAid flags them as sticky sentences, or flags them as passive voice, or flags them according to all these different things. But even if it doesn't flag it, you still need to look at that sentence and see if you can say it in a better way. If you have given your reader all the information that they need to understand what is in your head. Because copy editing is all about getting your idea, your story, this magical thing, this narrative that you've done your story edit and you've put your structure together, and now you've got your scenes. But copy editing is about figuring out how to get that perfectly, smoothly, without a bump, into the head of your reader. And often that's simplifying, often it's adding information, sometimes it's changing up your word choice. But the biggest issue that we see is that people don't put the time in to do that edit. And I raise my hand. I was one of the ones that did that.
I think that would probably is part of my downfall as well, is like writing some stuff and then like being so scared of it and not looking at it for a while. So I feel like even going back, I think I looked at it a few months ago and I'm like, man, this wasn't as terrible as I thought it was. Just
That's what I always
ramble.
think.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. I always expect it to be awful. And then I go back and I'm like, that's not that bad. Okay.
You're like,
maybe I can work with this. I've got the clays on the table. Now I just need to like mold it and shine it up a little bit. Yeah. Don't be afraid of bad writing, and don't underestimate what you've written, because even if it's not great, it's probably good. And then, spending the time on each of those sentences, because good sentences result in good paragraphs, which result in good chapters, which result in a good story. And so all those little bits all add up. So dive in and be prepared to do the work. And then my second thing, this is sort of a bit of advice, is to, when you're doing your copy edit, as much as possible, think about it from your reader's perspective. And that's down to the very sentence level. Like if you put the doer of your action at the end of your sentence, it means that your reader, the little movie that's playing in their head as they're reading your book, they can't fill in that picture until the end of the sentence, because they don't know who's doing the thing. If you start with an object, or you start with something that's not the focus of the doer, then it's less interesting, it's less engaging, and again, that adds up over the course of your manuscript. What were you going to say, Kristina?
Nope, it's okay. I was just watching the comments. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was nodding at a question. Oh, good question. That's all.
Yeah, but so that's what I was going to say. As you're reading, imagine the movie in your reader's head and try and help them fill in all those blanks. And sometimes that means simplifying your writing so that they're not like trying to figure out what your sentence was, because if they have to like stop and go, wait, what? Because your sentence is like gone all around the streets, then change that. If you've used a word that doesn't really mean anything, like more what? More more could be this much, more could be that much. You know, if you're not being specific, if you're not painting that picture, then your reader isn't gonna, they'll fill in the holes themselves, and it may not be what you want them to fill in. So those are my 2 copy editing tips.
I have to say, you know, this esteem issue of just accepting where you are and what you're building, you know, how much you write, how you write, what you've written. I mean, that's so funny because, you know, I guess that's why as editors, we spend the first part just saying, no, we do think it's good. We do think, you know, we have to first tell you what all your strengths are, because you're so prepared to, oh, I know it's horrible and I know this and I have these challenges. Well, of course you do. You know, everybody has something, you know, that's just, we all have baggage and we all have challenges. We don't, you know, we're not perfect, but that's why NaNoWriMo is such a great opportunity to really push yourself and see what can you do. Because if you don't enter the race, you'll never know what you could have done. But then going back and watching the tape, or, you know, reading the book of what you've written, it really is okay. And you know, it give yourself permission to say, yeah, I did that. That's mine. You know, you don't need an award. You just need a pat on the back. Because, I mean, we spend most of our time, you know, coaching people, and I wouldn't say therapy, but, you know, some of the times just saying, no, it is good. You can. It's really great. And these are all the parts that you're doing really, really well. And it's so important that you hear that before we get to the level of, okay, but these are still the challenges. And, you know, having ProWritingAid is already having that little person there telling you. There's always that popping right in and go, oh, I did it again. Oh, okay. And you just accept it. You know, oh, yep, that's what I do. That's what I do. I'm learning. And you move on. So, but you're doing great.
Yeah, you know, it's very true. And I mean, the other thing with ProWritingAid, one of the things you learn as you go. And so the rules pop up, you can get an explanation. And the beauty of that is once you know it, you know it. And as you write more, you will understand those rules and you'll just do them automatically, so that the next year when you do NaNoWriMo, that's already there. Nobody can take that away from you. You know it. And so there'll be some other issue next year that you don't know about, but you'll get past them, and you just keep getting better and better as you go and practice. That it, you know, we all start in the same place. I remember my first stuff. You think, and once in a while I read it and you think, oh, okay, well, at least I wrote it. That's pretty good.
Yeah, well, there are nuggets of greatness in there. You just sometimes it's hard to know how to break them out and set them free, right?
Yeah. All right. Oh, sorry. Can
I say one thing, Kristina? First, yes, there are so many. This is common. Every NaNoWriMo I've talked to, net writer who I've talked to, who's gone back to their rough draft expecting it to be horrifically messy, has been surprised by how many gems there are in it. But I wanted to read Donna Hanton's comment. She said, "Imposter syndrome is a requirement to be a writer." I think, unfortunately, that's true. And let me tell you, it doesn't matter what stage of writing you're at. I've talked to the most professional, accomplished writers in the world, and they also feel imposter syndrome and have doubts. And there's, I can't remember the exact wording of this quote from Maya Angelou, but even after she wrote the poem for Obama's inauguration, after all of her awards, after all of her books, she said, "I still feel like I'm pulling the wool over other people's eyes." So, you know, just, I don't know what to say, but just accept, I guess, that imposter syndrome is sort of like a fact of life, but to trust that you've got gems in that messy, rough draft.
Yep.
Happens to us all.
So true. That's a lovely way to end that piece. And then we're going to move on to working with a professional editor. So we'll head on over to JoEllen at First Editing.
Well, after you have done all of your writing, and then you've moved over from that creative stage into the editing, more logical, objective stage, and following the rules and doing everything there, then, you know, it's really understanding that it's, again, a process. In the same way that it takes a long time to write the book, be it 30 days or 30 years, it still is a process, whatever level you're on, that it's a journey and that you need to accept that. And I think part of the top two issues I find from the people who are entering into the editing stage, because they think, yay, I'm done. And then they just realize they opened another door and we're like, hi, they're, oh, what? And it's just, hello, here we are. So is not understanding perhaps the whole journey process. And that's really important to understand the different levels. And again, they're not linear. It's not something you do and you tick off and you're done. It's something that it's a revisionary cha-cha. You go a couple steps forward, a couple steps back. You do this little dance with your manuscript and with your ideas and with your stories and the development. And so once you understand that journey process and understand what the levels are, then you're more capable as not only a writer, but as an editor, because the more you write, the better you edit. The more you edit, the better you write. And it really is a learning process. And as an editor, we kind of end up being your coach, your mentor, your assistant, whatever it may be, to get you through this next stage. And so it's also when they don't know what the process is, the difference between content or structural editing and on down to line editing and copy editing, and then even doing the formatting and going into the proofreading stage. If you're not familiar with those stages, if you're not familiar with the process, then you can't really enunciate or say or ask for what you want and need, because you're not aware of what your choices are. You're not aware of what's available. And so it's really, the more you learn about, what is a structural edit, and Lisa will be talking tonight on the self-editing school, what is that and what does that entail, and how can I self-edit? How can I do that myself on my own? To, what is an editor doing and what can I do to become a better editor in preparation for the next level? And then, knowing what you want from that, because sometimes you may even understand your challenges, but you may not know how to correct them. And that's where, getting that extra help works. And it's really, really critical to be familiar with the editing process. We have an editing book, The Editing Journey, that Kristina and Lisa and I put together. And it kind of outlines that. And I would take a look at that after NaNoWriMo, after. And then when you know what you need, or what you think you want to achieve, then your editor can more clearly help you achieve those goals. And it's really a learning process. It's we coach you through it. We do all this, but there's lots of tools out there, again, to help you. And the other thing is that editing is an expensive process. It's one of the biggest investments you make besides your time and energy. It's the first time you have to, really invest. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you're getting your money's worth, get your best return on that investment by preparing, by learning and knowing what they're talking about, or being able to, when we use professional software like Fictionaries, it allows you to go back and cross-reference our summary letter so that you can use the online reports and the online definitions to better fully understand it. So it becomes a learning process in the same way that you use the reports within ProWritingAid to learn about what are your challenges. Are they sticky words? Are they, I type the word that at least 50 times a day. And I never noticed that until I was put ProWritingAid in, and it just haunts me every day. And yet now I just go, okay, search that. And it's what I do. It's there, but it's kind of that humorous thing. Eliminate, accept. But I know why, and I've become a better writer for it, be it copywriting, be it fictional writing, whatever I'm doing. So learn the process, learn the differences between content and structural editing, and then what a line edit is, and how which area, which level you're at, and when you could go into the copy editing. And if you don't know, then get an assessment, let somebody else tell you or walk you through that so that you can better understand. And those are really, once you know that better, then you can know how to ask for what you really want, and it's really giving words to, learning that new vocabulary. And then if you don't have a word for something, it doesn't exist. But once you have the words, that's the beauty of words, is that once you create a definition, then the whole world opens up, and the transformation and the transition happens from being just a writer to becoming an author. I hope that kind of outlines it, because that's really what it is. Not knowing the journey, and not knowing what to ask for or what you need, and then making sure you get it. Proper editors will tell you. I think that's where we are.
One of the interesting things, okay, so First Editing does a free sample for you, but with that free sample, they'll recommend what type of editing you need. And so you get a free view of your work, but you also get a view of what type of editing you might want to do. And that'll help guide you in your process and where you are in your writing. So
right. And those of you who are using ProWritingAid, there's a little button there. So at any point you just, and then it pops up and you go, oh, okay. So, you know, you can find out where you are in the process as long as you have a complete manuscript, as long as you have a beginning, middle, and end. Then you've got the structure, then you can go ahead and go on to the next level. And then we can tell you, you know, wow, you've really done the work here. You don't need to go into so much structure. I mean, when you use a process like Storyteller, then you're done. We can go into the line editing, copy editing, and get you out the door. But if you're still struggling with that, or if you're like me, you say, can you do it for me? Well, we have people who do that. And that's really helpful. At least it feels good.
Yeah, so someone, Ardell, I think, thank you, asked me to put up your website again. So I've just stuck that back up for a minute.
Sure.
And so just before we move on to Tara, one of the other things JoEllen said in there that's really important is that you have an editor who tells you what you're good at. And once you can see what you're good at, you can repeat that. And so, for example, if you have a scene that worked perfectly from beginning, middle to end, and the arc of the scene was good, and your editor goes, that right there, write scenes like that, you can study that and figure out, okay, you know, you can do it. So now just apply that to other scenes. So you do want an editor that doesn't just critique and go, here's where you need to do some work, but you want that editor to give you specifics and specific examples of what is really good. And with that, we're going to move on to Tara because it's already 10:02. So Tara, you're at the end, but we're going to talk about publishing now.
Yeah,
Sure.
the exciting part.
Yeah, this is the part. So once you've gone through all of these processes and you're really comfortable with how your story is, you've put all of the final tweaks, you know, it's gone through all of the different editing, you can publish your book at Kobowritinglife.com. So you can publish your ebook and then be able to send it to any reader around the world. So when I was thinking about the two common sort of things that people ask about when they're starting to publish. So I think with independent publishing, it's, you know, you're putting a lot of the effort in yourself, but you're also reaping all of the awards, rewards, maybe awards as well. It depends on how good your book is. But so I think the biggest question we get is around discoverability, because it's so easy now for a lot of people to put their works up on Kobo, and it can be hard for a new author or just any author in general to get their book in front of the readers that you really want. So what's really important with that is to make sure that your book is describing itself really well. So it sort of goes back to what Kristina was saying about the blurb of your book, making sure that it's summarizing the story. You know, you want to use your story points and your different chapter points there to make sure that you're really, really selling your title. So your synopsis, I mean, your cover is probably what people will judge it on, but then they're going to read your synopsis and want to learn about the book. So you want to make sure that it's something that really is pulling a reader in and making them want to, like, maybe they're going to open the preview, or maybe they're going to look at what else you've written, or what are the similar authors in that area as well. So discoverability, definitely the hardest thing, but there's some stuff around just tweaking your metadata that is really, really beneficial and can be good to do. And then I think one other thing that I think is very important, and NaNoWriMo does such a good job of it, is really leveraging the community. So in Nano, you have a lot of people, like we were talking about, you know, holding you accountable and things like that. I think with the independent publishing community, because it's ever changing, which is one of the reasons why I love working in it, but it has a very active community that is really open to sharing how they found success, you know, what they did, you know, where did they publish, you know, what type of book, you know, we have authors that write together from these sorts of things, that they advertise together as a means of trying to, you know, leverage into each other's audience. So I would say definitely take advantage of the indie writing community. You can follow our socials. If you just search Kobo Writing Life anywhere, we have a bunch of stuff available. But also there's a bunch of different Facebook groups, and I'm sure even on Nano there must be like NaNoWriMo indie author groups as well. So I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, everyone had to learn this at one point. Which is the same as doing Nano for the first time. You know, don't be afraid. You know, doing it and getting it done is sort of the main thing. So take advantage of all of the information that's already there. And chances are, you know, if you're asking a question, somebody has already asked that question 10 times and there is an answer somewhere. So I would definitely, yeah, take advantage of the community that's available.
Tara, can you just expand a little bit for people who might not know what's metadata?
Sure. It's like one of my favorite things to talk about. It's like the nerdiest part of my job. But it's basically the data about data. But if you think about going into a bookshop and you're physically picking up a book and you're browsing it to see what you want to read, it's giving you all the details. But when you're doing that digitally, you don't have the same luxury of just picking one thing and it's all there in front of you. It's just all details that are on the website. So this is the metadata of your book. It's basically your title, your author name, your synopsis, your categories. It's how you're telling the website about your book. So sometimes it can be overlooked because somebody's, you know, you're really excited, you've just finished your book and you want to get it out there. But taking the time to really research your metadata and making sure that it's optimized to really sell your story upon a few glances, I think that's very, very key.
Hey, Kristina, can I ask a question?
Do it.
Building on that, because I do think a lot of fiction writers, this is like something they're confused about, is metadata and discoverability. How does metadata, like I get it for nonfiction that you want to make sure you're in certain categories. How does that influence the way that fiction writers should be thinking about?
I think it's super important for fiction writers, especially a lot of our fiction writers write serialized content. So, you know, several books in a series, and metadata really is the most important part of that, because if you put your series information correctly, like, and what I mean by correctly is just like no typos and making sure that you have the same details on every single book and that you put the book numbers in. When a reader finishes, say, book 1 in a series, and if book 2 is available, we're going to tell them, hey, here's the next book to the series, and really try and prompt them to keep reading with the books that you have. So I think that's super key. And like we even allow you to do, you know, like a 0.5 or a 0 if you wanted to do a novella. So I think that's really important. So sometimes people overlook that and might have entered the series name but not the number, and then it's really hard for our system in the back end to try and recommend the next best book. But yeah, it is all about the recommendations, like just making sure you have as much information in there and kind of using as many sort of keywords, and you're basically optimizing everything to do with your metadata.
Okay, yes. So there we are. That was quick. We've all done a first draft right to being published. So how awesome are we? So we have a few questions. The first one I'm going to answer is, as Hema Horizon says, I have ProWritingAid, Fictionary, and use Scrivener, and I'm new to writing. What's the best process to use with these tools along the way? And when does one tool become effective for your story? So I've written a lot in Scrivener. We have a lot of Scrivener users who then go on to Fictionary. It's a great place to write your first draft. We love writers who come from Scrivener because you can compile and export from there into a professional standard. And when you export your manuscript where every chapter starts with the word chapter, and there's a scene break character between scenes where chapters have multiple scenes. And then that just imports straight into Fictionary, and off you go on your story editing. And then as a writer, here's your choice. You can focus just solely on story editing and get your story straight, or you can combine it with ProWritingAid and use ProWritingAid within Fictionary and do some copy editing at the same time. Or if you want to do it later, finish your story, export from Fictionary, and you can do your whole novel with ProWritingAid and do your copy editing then. So you're going to find you have your own flow and how you like to work, and you need to stay true to that. So don't try and force somebody else's process on you. Try a few things and see what makes you happy when you're writing. Like, are you actually enjoying it and it's good? And what is productive and you're moving forward. The next question I had was for Lisa, and I got to back up a bit here. In ProWritingAid, is there a way to turn off the flagging of poor grammar and sentence fragments in dialogue?
You know, this is a tricky one that we keep coming back to, because often if you're writing, you know, with grammar mistakes and diction mistakes in dialogue, you don't want to have it flagged because it's part of your character's dialogue. But also sometimes you get mistakes in there that are just mistakes that you don't want to have in that diction. And so there's a few things you can turn off. You can, in dialogue, you can turn off redundancies and diction and vague words and cliches. So none of that will be flagged in your dialogue, but we don't let you totally turn off grammar and spelling checking in your dialogue because we're worried that you'll miss something. So what you can do is the first time you hit ignore, it used to be that every time you ran all the reports, all of those new suggestions would come up again. But now in a dialogue, if in one document, if you hit ignore, then it won't be flagged anymore. So go through them all really carefully and check and make sure that your mistakes and your grammar mistakes are in there purposefully. And if they are, then hit ignore, and then you shouldn't see them again.
Okay, so we have one more question for Tara, and then we're pretty close to time here. And it's from Ardell. How does one prevent overlap between Kobo, Amazon, Drafted Digital, and Ingram Sparks is what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Ardell. When you publish with Kobo, we don't have any exclusivity, so you can publish on as many other platforms as possible. In fact, we really encourage you to do this to get your books out in front of as many readers, however they want to read them. But yeah, you do want to avoid duplication. So if you're using D2D and Ingram Spark, for instance, you potentially would just don't send to Kobo distribution through there. You can use them to distribute to all of the other wonderful places that they go to. But I'd encourage you to just come direct when you're coming to Kobo, because you earn a little bit more money and there's a lot of discoverability opportunities with coming direct. And then I would also always just double check your, what you're signing up for with the other retailers, because like I said, we don't have exclusivity, but some others might. So you want to make sure that you're not kind of breaking any clauses there.
All right, terrific. So one more question that I'm not going to answer, but Steve had a question about putting scenes into chapters. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a link to a webinar where I cover that whole topic in depth on how to do that when I send out the replay for this, because it's a big question and we're kind of out of time here. So I just want to finish with really what you want to do now is head on over to NaNoWriMo.org and get yourself ready to write that novel in November, as Grant talked about. Prep time is really important. And if you can get some prep done now, there's lots of activities going on to do that, you're going to be ahead of the game. And then don't forget that you can do your copy editing in ProWritingAid.com. And if you're past that, please do reach out to firstediting.com through their website. And maybe you're already ready to publish, in which case it's Kobowritinglife.com. And I'm at Fictionary.co. We have a 2-week free trial, no credit card required. So if you want to give Fictionary a go, of course you can do that. If you like this video, please click like below. And if even better, subscribe. We've got lots of informative videos out there for you to help with your writing. So I want to
I just say we've got there's a whole bunch of people on the ProWritingAid team that are doing NaNoWriMo this year as well, and we're sponsoring it. So if you're in the threads, in the forums rather, go to the sponsor threads there, and we're all there, and we've shared a bunch of stuff, and we're constantly going to be sharing updates on all of our processes. There's all kinds of us here, so we'll be in there. Say hello.
Great.
Kobo's doing a lot of writing together too, I believe.
We are. We'll have the CoboWriMo group, and we'll feel free to join. And we're going to be in there writing and doing lots and lots of different stuff. And even our team in Europe, we're going to have a kind of a battle off between North America and Europe into who's going to accomplish what.
And Tara's going to finish it this year. You heard it. You heard it here first.
Oh God.
That's the big takeaway. We're all going to watch that, and we're going to publicize her results at the end. So there's no pressure.
Oh my God, Grant, how
you
can I
can
cheat
do it.
Nano?
Hey, we're going to celebrate those 25,000 words no matter what. So
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'll
Short
try this
stories.
year, though.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate all of you coming and talking to all the great people out here listening. And I will send a replay to everyone tomorrow. So if you missed it or you missed part of it or you want to send it to your friends, that's great too. It was a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Kristina.
Kristina.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us on.
thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.